It takes care of that.
Centrally located hot zone in this one room.
Should have all meetings in here.
All set, Nicole?
All set.
Oh, great. All right, everybody, welcome back to the Select Board meeting for March 15, 2022. If you were here earlier, you met us, the Select Board. But if you just showed up, Nicole McStay, Town Administrator, is at the end of the table. Bill Taylor's to my left. Bill Kennedy is to the closer left. I'm Tyler Ward. We're the Select Board. With us are the Budget Committee to get us through our agenda this evening. We have Bob Lambert in the audience, Don Parkhurst down at the end of the table, Jim Long, Rich Clark, Ronnie McIntyre, Carl Mavzino, Al Lennis, Rick Lesser, and Mandy Sliver are here with us. Any other Budget Committee members out there?
I got them all.
All right, we have Chief Walker at the hot seat, and Lily Gilligan, our Finance Director, is here to answer some money questions. Chief Gennard's here to talk about a portion of his budget, and Seth McLean is here as well. Welcome. And so, Nicole, I'll hand it over to you to start off with
All right.
presentation.
So the goal of tonight's meeting is to get the Budget Committee and the Select Board to vote on whether or not they recommend each of the warrant articles that we are putting forward to town meeting. We do have some changes tonight. The first change is to the budget for fiscal year 2023. This is a relatively small change. We're actually looking to move up the purchase of a cruiser to this fiscal year, which will reduce the budget, the police department's budget for the FY23 fiscal year. We are also looking to, on the other side of things, increase the budget by about $63,000 to account for the first year's bond payment on the Public Works Facility bond. That's a $2.5 million bond. We're going to be looking to take that out in the July bond sale. So those are the two changes that we incorporated. As a net increase, Lily, correct me if I'm wrong, of $23,000?
23.5.
23.5.
Yeah,
Thank you.
it's 62.5 for the debt and $38,000 reduction for the cruiser.
Any questions about that change?
What's the current percentage increase over last year?
I don't have that right in front of me.
It's not an increase.
Yeah, it was minus 0.3 before, so it's
Yeah.
probably minus 0.2.
It's almost, it was a negative 44,000, so now it's a negative 20,000?
I can bring that slide up if you need to see it.
No.
It's buried a little bit.
Still down.
On the proposed bond for the DPW, I think you guys estimated a 4% as a conservative estimate for
We're now
that.
looking at 3.5. That's the estimate that we're getting from the bond bank. That's their not to exceed number.
Could still be low.
Anyone else? Chief Gennard for 62.5. That's not an electric vehicle, is it?
It is not.
Okay.
38.
38, sorry.
38. And one of the reasons why we're doing this is because the availability for cruisers is very slim. We have an opportunity through a dealer out of Framingham, Mass, who is receiving a couple of hundred vehicles. Most are already spoken for. We have an opportunity to seize this vehicle while we can and reduce the FY23 budget at the same time.
Great.
Any other questions? Then certainly would ask for a vote from the Budget Committee and then a vote from the Select Board.
So Budget Committee, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, favor.
Any opposed? All right, unanimous budget over there. And Select Board, all those in favor?
Aye.
No opposed. All right.
Thank you.
Thank you for the work. Again, all our department heads did a lot of tight work on this budget, so thank you for that.
Just a quick point of information, Chief, if you buy a new cruiser, does another one get sold, or?
Yes. One of the older vehicles, around 150,000 almost miles on it.
And where, do we see those dollars at some point?
Yes, that'll show up in the revenue account. That'll be put out to bid. Taxi cab companies usually bid on them, and for a vehicle like that, we'll probably get around $5,000 for it.
And does that show up in the budget anywhere right now, or would that be in the next budget? Or how do we account for that?
It shows up as offsetting revenue, and so when we go to set the tax rate will be just that much lower.
Thank you.
The next one, we have the establishment of the Municipal Facilities Expendable Trust Fund, $350,082.19. This is the money that the Select Board already accepted. It's our share of the ARPA funds. It was accepted back in August. We need to be able to establish an expendable trust fund to be able to use that. If you remember that far back, you may recall that this is very limited as far as the use of these funds. We can't use them, for instance, to pay back fund balance or anything like that. One of the things that we can do with the funds, though, is use it towards facilities that serve a public health purpose. It just so happens that we have a project that fits exactly that. So we'd like to set aside these funds for that purpose. And so no money would be raised through taxation for this. This is the money that we've already received from the federal government.
This would be the first of two.
First of two, we'll be getting the second one sometime this spring. I'm not entirely sure when.
And that money will go into the trust fund as well.
It will, yes. It'll need to be, the selectmen will need to make a vote to do that.
Just a question, I don't know if this was probably covered in another meeting, and I apologize. Are the ARPA funds, do they have like a limit on the amount of time that you can use them, or do they have to be used in a certain amount of time?
I don't believe so. We have to go back and take a look. I don't think that there was a time limit. It was just to the purpose that they could be put to.
Ready for a vote? All right, Budget Committee, how do you vote? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, Select Board, so that was unanimous. All those in favor?
Aye.
Same. Great, thanks.
Is Ally not taking those today?
She is not here. She's taking them from home. Okay.
Who's watching?
Yes. Pay-as-you-throw Special Revenue Fund. These are the funds that are raised through the sale of the pay-as-you-throw trash bags, the blue trash bags. They pay for the program itself, and so this is the budget for that program for fiscal year '23. Questions?
Budget Committee, all those in favor?
Aye.
Any, no opposed, right, that looked unanimous. And Select Board, all those in favor?
Aye.
Nicole,
Yes.
is this being shown on TV, or is that
It is.
TV doesn't work?
That TV doesn't work right now.
Okay.
Yeah, it is, we are on air, got that light working, so.
Oh, I didn't see the on air up
Yep.
there.
Fred, you haven't heard me talk about that before.
All right, these are the, to raise and appropriate for the expendable and capital reserve trust funds. You can see as we go through this list, the total amount is $352,100, $15,000 of which to be placed in the GIS Capital Reserve Fund, $18,100 to be placed in the Police Department Fleet Management Capital Reserve Fund, $100,000 for the Fire Department Apparatus and Equipment Capital Reserve Fund, $5,000 for the Winter Operations Expendable Trust Fund, $150,000 to be placed in the Fleet Management Capital Reserve Fund, and $65,000 to be placed in the Recreation Department Equipment Capital Reserve Fund.
And of course, we did discuss all these throughout budget season
Yes.
with our department heads. And I should clarify, actually, when I'm asking for the Budget Committee and Select Boards to vote in favor, this is in favor of recommending it go on the warrant.
Recommending it to the voters.
To the
yeah.
voters, yes. So we're not pushing these through. The voters will have their say at May town meeting and on the ballot. So with that, Budget Committee, do we have all those in favor?
Aye.
And that looks unanimous. Select Board, all those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Unanimous as well.
Okay, roadway system upgrades, capital reserve fund for $400,000. This is year 6 or 7?
Be funding year 6.
Year 6 of the 10-year program.
which we have discussed at length and has been
Yes.
successful.
For 6 years now.
And everybody loves that the roads are getting fixed, right? So,
I can put you to sleep again if you want.
No, thanks.
any further discussion? Budget committee, all those in favor, say aye. Unanimous, and select board, all those in favor.
Aye.
Okay, next one we have, this is a housekeeping item. We're transferring $3,000 in cemetery fund, cemetery trustees checking account to the Expendable Trust Fund.
Do we have votes on the budget committee? All those in favor?
Aye.
And select board?
Aye.
Next, $75,000 to go to the sewer. This is out of funds, sewer fees, 100% funded by sewer fees. $75,000 to be placed in the previously established sewer capital reserve fund.
All those in favor, budget committee?
Aye.
Select board?
Aye.
Could I ask how much is in the fund now?
Sure.
Ask it.
It doesn't affect my vote.
I get an answer. You can ask it.
That's my way of asking.
$164,225.97. All right, and this will be a vote to continue a capital reserve fund that we're, discontinue a capital reserve fund that we're no longer utilizing. It will move the remaining balance, which at this moment, or actually I think when we wrote this, was back in February, was $31.25 in that fund. That will move that amount to the general fund.
This is a hard-hitting one.
Is anybody on the
We'd have to
budget
have some
committee
debate
opposed to
here.
this? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Select board?
Aye.
Aye.
All right, I'm going to pause right here. So last minute today, unfortunately, we had a little bit of news in terms of the fire and ambulance facility project and the bond that we are planning on asking for. Last week, we received notice from the Hampshire Municipal Bond Bank that they were going to be accepting pre-applications for their bond sale for July. And so Lily and I talked about it a bit, and at the end of that discussion, I instructed Lily to begin the pre-application process for the fire and ambulance facility bond and also the public works facility bond. We knew that if we put together the application now and town meeting voted it down, we could easily pull that application, but by starting it now, we would be able to get into that bond sale and again, hopefully lock in that 3.5% interest rate. In that, a component of that applications is a calculation for the town's debt limit. Towns in New Hampshire cannot exceed 3% of their valuation in general fund debt. And we found through this pre-application process that we would be, there we go, exceeding that debt limit. As you can see, our base valuation for debt limit is near the top of the page. That's $919,846,788. That's the town's total valuation before you take out exemptions or TIF districts. Below that, you can see that the limit, again, on the general fund is 3%, which limits us to a total indebtedness of $27,595,404. Our current debt right now, general funded debt, is $6,871,273. That's principal only, not interest. So with this issue, which again is the two bonds, the $2.5 million highway garage bond and the $23 million potential fire and ambulance facility and municipal campus bond, that runs us over our limit by almost $5 million. So we have to pump the brakes on this project as a result. We are not going to be able to bring it forward, at least not this year, at least not in this form. What we would like to do, given the reality of this debt limit, is to ask the Budget Committee and the Select Board if they would back a $2 million article at town meeting which would allow us to get an architect and engineering and final design of a phased project. We would be able to move forward this project in probably 3 phases, starting with our most critical needs first, but then designing it in such a way that it allows us to build out further as we move forward in time, and are in a better position to be able to fund and finance this. This does, of course, have the long-term effect of costing more in the long run by doing it in phases. You know, nothing ever gets cheaper to build. But it does, you know, potentially allow us to do this in a way that is a bit more manageable for the town. I've prepared 2 variations on this warrant article. One of them is a direct raise of $2 million through taxation. The tax impact of that would be $2.32 per thousand, or a one-time impact on, let's say, a house worth $300,000 is $696. The second version is a 10-year bond level principal. That would have a 31-cent tax rate impact, and on a $300,000 house, that would be about $93. And at this point, I'm sure people have questions.
Who wants to ask the first? Rich?
So this $2 million is just for soft cost design?
This would be design, engineering, permitting, everything that we would need to get the final design in front of the voters.
So we paid $200,000 for conceptual.
Yes.
It's just, again, $2 million for design. I had a few people email me about Litchfield's fire department, which is 11,000 square feet. We have 6,800. Chief was looking at 30,000. And 2 years ago, which is 2 years ago, which the numbers don't work, I mean, they were $4 million.
Yep.
I mean, I looked at that and I thought that 11,000 square feet would be perfect size for the town of Peterborough. I mean, we had 7 bays, this one had 4 bays, drive-through, basically had everything. You can go online and find it, Litchfield Fire Department. I having a problem with $2 million for to continue down the road. I think we should.
If
If I could just speak for 1 second,
Yes,
Rich.
please.
I think it's important to provide some perspective on projects. The Peterborough Library, when it came to the voters and asked for the $8.5 million, had spent $1.3 million of private funds to get to the point where they had a guaranteed maximum price and design drawings. That was a phased process. They worked with consultants to do an analysis of what they needed for the library, how it was going to be laid out. That was around $300,000. They then further hired an architect from that, had an architect go through, do the engineering, do the design, and do the drawings, which is about another $850,000, and there were some other funds thrown in. That then, when they came forward, their $8.5 million was construction cost, bringing the total cost of their project to not really 8.5, but to somewhere around 9.5, 9.7. When you look at this $2 million, this would come off of whatever cost was in the total cost of the building, because our total cost that we had going forward, looking at that, was based on included those architectural costs to get to that building. So the total project cost we were proposing, you know, the 21, 22, 23, or where that wound up, included final drawings and architectural costs. So it was built into that. So this cost too would be coming off that gross cost of the building. If you just look at the size and scope of the library and the money they spent getting to a final drawings for the guaranteed maximum price with the construction manager on board, it is in line with that. The other thing that's important to consider is something to look at for the process is a lot of people have spent an enormous amount of time trying to compare our needs and our organization to other needs in other organizations. I know that the chair of your committee has spent a lot of time doing that individually. It is incredibly difficult for folks to look at and necessarily understand how you get in a jump from 7,000 square feet to maybe even 14,000 square feet or certainly 30,000 square feet and look at that. I think that one of the things that folks, and correct me if I'm wrong, Carl, but you've spent some time analyzing this and looking at it, and although there may be some question as to how big do individual offices need to be or what is the gross square footage allowed per apparatus, programmatically, I think there is fair agreement, including through our task force, that what we are looking to build is designed to meet the needs of our organization, the way we run our organization. It really has very little to do with the fact Peterborough is a town of 6,500. Peterborough is a town of 6,500 that provides ambulance service to 13,000 people in over 75 square miles. Peterborough is also a community that has a hospital, 3 schools, 5 high-rise elderly housing buildings, 6 other, multi-story apartment buildings. We are not your typical community of 6,500 in the state of New Hampshire. So it is very challenging for us as members of the committee, members of the department who have worked on this, in some cases, 25 years, to continually hear, why do you need this, why do you need this, why do you need this? It is not the fire chief or the fire department asking for this. It is the community having gone through very established systematic processes to determine what the needs are for the fire departments, for the organization that serves this community and the surrounding communities. And unfortunately, the longer we continue to put this project off, the larger that scope is going to grow as standards change, as design changes, as requirements change. And I don't disagree that it is a big building. To quote Tyler Ward at our last task force meeting, this is probably the largest project the town of Peterborough will ever undertake. And at some point, I'm very reluctant and really troubled by the fact that folks are looking to back the program that they have supported in this town for 100+ years with our fire department into a design because that's what they feel comfortable with. And that, and I think I speak for the other members of the fire department that are here, in looking at that, we are at this position going to be forced to do that, but it is a challenge for us to continue to move forward with our program that is a taxpayer-funded, taxpayer-supported, grown program, and not have folks realize what this program takes and where we are. So getting back to the $2 million, compared to our own library that was, 4 years ago you went through the design of that building, if you look at 4 years ago for what was about 1.3, 1.4, and you bring that up to costs in 2023, $2 million is probably an analogous cost. And, that in and of itself is not unreasonable. And, it is becoming very troubling, particularly for those folks sitting behind me and the other 60 people they work with, to continue to feel like we are, as public servants here, being discounted and beaten up as not knowing what we want, as looking for something that is exorbitant, as looking for something that is just full of wants and not needs. And I've tried to explain to people and express to people, come down and visit with us, come down and look at our studies, come down and look at the history of this. Less than a dozen people in the 2 years we've been talking about this have taken advantage of that. Yet they continue to complain about the cost in the program and what we want. And it's reaching the point where it's very hard for these folks here behind me, like I said, and the other 60-some-odd people that support this community to continue to go through this process. Sorry, I digressed.
No, that's fine.
No, thank you for sharing that,
Yeah.
Chief. You packed a lot in that, and it was needed to be said.
Yeah.
Thank you. Mandy?
I'll start by saying I want you to know that I appreciate you and the fire department and everyone, and I think everyone knows that about me. And I agree with you. Sometimes it is troubling when you feel that people aren't appreciating what you do, and I definitely appreciate everything that is done, and I don't think that that's necessarily how everyone feels. I think the question of the amount of money is definitely a concern, and that's been the primary concern, I think, at least from the people that have spoken here. and I'd like to go back to the calculation for our, the debt that we are allowed to have, if I could, because what that's telling me is I'm not saying that the fire department isn't important. I'm not saying any of that at all. I'm saying that we have all felt that we can't afford that number. The state of New Hampshire is telling us we can't afford that number. Like, they're not allowing us to take out the amount of debt that we're saying we need to build this building. So I don't see any way to build it. So I just, looking at these numbers, if we take out the $2.5 million, because that's not figured in that debt out, is that correct?
I'm sorry?
The $6.8 million that we have as debt out, we have not added in the 2.5 that we're...
We have not, no, that's
Right.
included in this issue number, that 25.6.
Okay. So if we take out what we were asking for with the 23, we have the 2. And then I also, the base valuation for debt limit, just as an aside, that 919,000 you said includes TIF?
That includes everything, yes.
Yeah, my understanding of the RSA is that TIF should not be included in the valuation, which does take down our margin.
But the
even
TIF debt
farther.
service is included in the general.
Again, we can figure that calculation out later, but looking at the numbers, you said if we do this project in phases, it's going to end up costing more money. So-
Ultimately, over the long run, yes.
Right.
Which is why we were
Maybe.
trying to do it all at once.
Exactly. So we would basically be maxing out our credit limit as a town for the next 10 to 15 years, is what we're saying.
Sure.
If we have this project,
Yes.
plus we have the community center coming down the road maybe, and a police station, that just makes me really nervous to completely max out everything that we would be able to bond for the foreseeable future. So while I want and was prepared to support what was coming today, I don't see how it's possible, so I'm not sure
So
how we can move forward without kind of reevaluating.
Let me explain a little bit more. So the $2 million, it is a lot of money for the drawings, for engineering, for permitting, but it would get us a plan in the end that I believe we really need, which is to meet the immediate needs of the service, which are dire, are absolutely dire. And it is a little bit high, the 2 million is a little high, but I think what we're asking for is ultimately a very complicated build. It's gonna require a lot of engineering to figure out how you build, a smaller station that you can in the future add more onto and have it still flow and still be a fully functional building at the end of the day. So, but we need somewhere to start with.
There's another way to look at this. This just came up at, 11 o'clock this morning? We figured out that we don't have enough on the credit card to fund this whole thing. And as devastating a blow as that is to the project right now, it could end up being a good thing. And there's a few different reasons for that. Number one, this 2 million would technically be coming off of the 23 million that was originally proposed. However, that $23 million price tag is, you take 12% of that, which is general engineering and architectural costs, is $2 million of that 23. It might not end up being a $23 million project at the end of this. We may find out that something's very different. The nature of that number getting to 23 million in the first place was because we were basing it on extremely preliminary numbers that could have changed dramatically between now and May. Now we have the opportunity, if we get this forward, it may not be $2 million, but what we will end up with is an actual design, an actual plan that we can start working on getting outside funding for. We'll actually have something that we can take to our state and federal representatives and say, hey, look, this is going to be the first type of this project of its kind. A complete net zero building, it's going to be an ambulance transfer facility that everybody knows, and private ambulance transfer facilities are going away. Like you can see the Deluzio one, Cheshire is now being forced to buy that transfer service in order to keep a basic level of service that we're providing for this area, for the hospital, for the community, for all the surrounding communities. We have an opportunity now to get something on paper that we can go to state and federal people and say, hey, look, we need funding for this. Our town, we have actual evidence that we can't afford to do this, and it is a dramatic need for the area. We'll have something that we can bring to them and say, we need your money, and we need your support. But when we had what our, whatever the preliminary stuff is that we were looking at 2 weeks ago, they'd look at that and be like, yeah, well, there's nothing here for me to even discuss getting you funds for. And part of any infrastructure bill, any emergency funding needs, or wherever they, want to add on these numbers. So with this, we have a chance to take a step back, take a way deeper look at it, not be completely under the gun to try and jam something together by May to vote on that could be 23 million, could have gone over, could have been less. We don't really know that. But with this, we will know. We'll have something that a builder can actually look at, and we can get a quote that's not a fantasy quote from somebody that's in a high-rise building in Cambridge. It's going to be something that a contractor can actually look at and say, here's where I can save you money, here's where, here's, base costs that it's going to be, and here's something that you go out to bid with. So, I think we can look at it as a good thing that this happened. We absolutely cannot finance the $25,600,000 or whatever that we were gonna need to, based on very conceptual, very preliminary plan. So this is an opportunity to pump the brakes, take a way closer look at it, and move forward with something that everybody can eat.
Jim?
If we're pumping the brakes, and maybe I should know this, we got 3 different projects over there. We have the firehouse, we have the community center, and we have the police department possibly going over there at some point. So if we're pumping the brakes, why aren't we kind of looking at all 3 as one major project rather than 3 separate projects?
This is our opportunity also to do that,
Yeah.
I think.
Well, this will also give us again, we still need to wait for the community center study to come back. We've got a few months left yet until that comes in. And so at that point, we will certainly be reconsidering the whole thing.
So this $2 million that is being proposed is possibly for the development of all 3 at
Would be
at
just,
once?
it would include the siting. It would not include the community center. As of this time, the community center is still only user fee supported. It doesn't get much in the way of tax dollars supporting it, so unless there's a change in how the community center is funded, we'll need to figure that out. But so far, that hasn't been put in front of the select board yet. Another piece that's important to remember, and I neglected, I wanted to mention this right up front. We're still very much in early phases with this. I still need to run all of this past our bond council to make sure it's okay, that the language is okay, especially since we're already past our bond hearing. Want to make sure that she's comfortable with the language, removing just construction out and reducing the amount down before we go to open session at town meeting. It may well be that she is not comfortable with that, in which case we'll just have to pull it off the warrant entirely this year. So just want to make sure that got out there.
I must say I'm looking forward to the CIP next year because we got all these things to take account of the long-term planning. And I think that's the point that Bill Taylor's making for us, is that there is an opportunity buried in here. With respect to the comments from the chief, having worked with the library somewhat, I do think that this is consistent with the costs for engineering and design that are going to be forthcoming, that are needed, and that are embedded in the current proposal anyway. So it's not additional money, it's moving it around. And also, I expect the way it will be done is not going to hand somebody the money. We're going to do it in pieces according to the engineering. Has to be done somewhat after you do some of the design and so on. So it won't necessarily be this amount for any particular part of it. So my position is this is a reasonable number for where we are. The biggest concern I have is the point that Mandy brought up. So everybody in front of me has been doing things that I think are important. And that is whether we can bear the cost of a fire station comparable to the one we've been talking about, given the constraints on our capacity to handle debt. Bill Taylor has an answer for us, and that is if we have a more robust design, we can go out and seek better donations from federal and state sources.
And private.
Yeah, and private too, yeah, which is what we did, of course, with the library. That's not an impossible thing to do. However, it's not necessary to rely on that. We've learned something in the last couple of weeks here, and that is we have to feel the constraint that's coming from the ability of the town people to vote for it and the ability of the town people to pay for the debt. So when we go through this design process, I think we will be much more aware than we were in the past of what our ceilings are. And we can move those ceilings as we find grant money, perhaps, but I think we are going to be paying more attention to those. It's not we're going to start off with a number and say this is it, but we do have to end up with a number we know that the town will vote for, and actually we need 2/3 of the town. So it's, when you get a bond, you have to get a 2/3 vote. So it has to be a very strong support. So we're going to need a lot of strong evidence. I think we've learned something. So anyway, to stop talking, let me just say, I think the 200,000 is the appropriate thing to do, and the appropriate... $2 million. Oh, $2 million.
Start over.
$2 million. I think it's an appropriate amount for 10% of what we ought to be doing right now.
And by no means am I saying we should immediately come up with that kind of money, but ensure that, as Nicole pointed out, it is phased in a way that our end goal is making sure we meet the needs of the entire program, the organization, not saying this is all you will ever have. For example, looking at the campus approach, I don't know if Chief Kennard's left the room, but understanding at some point in time, 79 Grove Street is not going to be the best location and the best site for the police station. Let's make sure we have the opportunity to incorporate that into something the town has thought through. And that's really just what we need to make sure.
Anyone else from the budget committee?
Yes, I wanted to ask how long would it be before we'd actually able to build a fire station? What is the sense of that at this time? Could real construction begin? And the second part of that, my question is, are there any changes in the programmatic specifications, if you will, anticipated in view of what you're hearing tonight? And
I don't think that in terms of the program, I think it's in terms of how we approach solving the problems. There are some problems that are more significant than the others. For example, health and safety of our occupants, and where they're living. So that's one thing where the prior time we spent working with architects and working with consultants and even internally was solving the problem in one big bite. So now it is, how do we solve this problem in smaller bites? And to Mandy's point around the bonding, these may be steps that are done in decades. It may be at this point in time we're at a position where we can address these immediate 3 or 4 needs, ameliorate those problems, and we know that 10 years before we can find the next part of this, but we know that the space physically exists and the opportunity exists for that. We haven't plunked something down here and not had that opportunity and able to go back and look at having that. And that's sort of, I think, in my conversation with Nicole, how we want to look and do that. Because as it is, some of the things that down there, and we internally have already looked at how are we going to, now that this project's at least another year out, how are we going to solve some of those immediate problems and some of the crises that we're facing in that building. So I think the answer is when will construction start? I mean, we were looking, if everything had gone perfectly and we had been funded this May and everything, we weren't looking to really start construction until probably spring of '24, for that. So I mean, the construction process is 2 years out from, when it gets approved. So, now we're looking at 25, 26 maybe even for start of construction.
Or it still could be on target, because we're still going through, what we're still proposing is the design phase, which was going to take a year of that time anyways.
And to your point,
okay.
and echoing what Carl said, I mean, the term that FEMA and the feds use is shovel-ready. And having those shovel-ready projects and not having something that purely is conceptual, which is where we are now.
I think it's a real opportunity to get a lot more outside money.
Andy, yeah?
Just a question about the bond. It sounds like, so like you mentioned, Nicole, that we're past our bond hearing.
We are past the bond hearing, so since we're still talking about the same project, we're still talking about the same location, we're still talking about the same end goal, we're just talking about doing it, we're essentially taking construction out of the equation. I still need to talk to bond counsel to make sure that this is acceptable, that by reducing what we're asking for, we would still be able to bond it this year. If not, then the bond would come off the warrant.
And so then, if that happens, where would we be at in this process? If
We
this
would-
bond comes, I mean, are we just at a complete standstill for a year? Or?
Yes. Yep.
The first option you gave here was not a bond. We could not pursue that option?
That's correct, you could, and this would be a guarantee. So you would be able to raise $2 million through taxation. Again, that would be $2.32 per thousand. And again, on the $300,000 home, it'd be about $696. We could potentially reduce that amount by, again, rewriting some of the warrant, and instead of putting money into the expendable trust fund for the project, take that $700,000, put that immediately towards us. That would reduce the entire amount, but then we don't have that money going forward. So it's a lot of possibilities, a lot of different ways of approaching this problem. But you would still have a significant impact on the tax rate, regardless.
Yeah, a couple of questions. Does this $2 million assume that we're going to go forward with a $23 million project? Is it fair to state that that's the town's position?
Yes, that's what we base this on.
And do you have any idea what other, so is this considered phase one, let's say, if we assume that this would be phase one? Can you kind of game me through what other phases might look like? Have you talked through that at all?
This isn't even a conceptual. This is really just a spitballing, what are the options that are in front of us should this not pass at Maytown meeting? One of the thoughts that we had was, what if we attacked just our immediate need, which is for the ambulance service, and build what is essentially an ambulance service substation at this Elm Street location, and build it in such a way that you would be able to wrap a fire department around it in the future, and then add a police department onto it even further down the line.
And you may have showed this number originally, but do we know what our credit limit is essentially right now, given
Yes.
those constraints? What's the max that we could borrow today if we wanted to for this project, a project?
Basically, our credit limit is $27,595,404, but we already have a balance of $6,871,273.
We got 20 left on the credit card.
Yeah.
So we could bond $20 million if we
We would not be able to.
Hypothetically, but then that's our maximum, and that puts us in a fairly precarious position.
Right.
We can't do that. This is like something that we
So we
can't
could
do.
theoretically bond $15 million, and we would still have a little bit of cushion if we
Yes.
so desired. Okay, thank you.
We have to operate on the off chance that there's some sort of disaster that
Oh, no,
if a
definitely.
bridge gets washed out in
Yes.
some other part of town and we have to all of a sudden fix it,
Yeah.
we can't already have been at the top of our
Exactly, I
debt
agree on
limit.
that. That's
But
right.
again, this $2 million is based off of a very preliminary conceptual design of 23. So this is, because this happened at 11 o'clock this morning, we found out that the credit card's busted. We had to come up with a program so that we're not completely abandoning any forward movement on this project.
Right.
So we gotta come up with something so that we keep something moving. Because we know that it's the biggest need of the town, but now we have a chance to balance it with not going crazy over the project and find another money for it.
And again, my bottom line is still kind of, I'm 100%. If we got this project fully funded, as Chief and Nicole, you've projected or presented, but the bottom line for me is what can we afford? And more bottom line is what can we get the voters to pass with the 2/3 majority? So again, I don't want to sound like a broken record, but I could see maybe going back to the drawing board a little bit and see if there are any possibilities.
It's allowing us to do that.
We have to go
Yeah.
back because it needs to fit into the budget, but it also needs to ensure that at some point in time we can meet our program. Or you folks have to change our program for us.
It's those folks over there.
This is a drawing board moment.
Any more,
Completely back to the drawing
any other
board.
questions from Budget Committee or Select Board before I open it to the audience?
I have just a couple small questions. How married are we to this programmatic specifications that you presented to?
I mean, it's, Nicole is on the crosswalk. I mean, this study goes back to 2004 to 2017 and to now, and it's what we do as a department. There may be opportunities for some small changes in terms of, space here and there or other things, but really to look at our program and maybe, again, I'm not, I've been going 1,000 different directions in the last, 7 hours here. But, looking at that, is that evaluation and the phasing of that, and not only the building, but the support of the program and what maybe, I don't want to use the word stagnant, but what we slow down or pump the brakes we've already used tonight for on certain things and allow other things to continue to grow. But I feel comfortable, and I think, Nicole and a lot of the folks that were involved feel comfortable with what we have put forward as what we do in the space we need to do it. It is just a question of, like, I think Nicole's reiterated, and I said, meeting the immediate health and safety needs of our employees within the community, and also then ensuring that as we go forward, we have the spaces. It may short-term involve some creativity, looking at utilizing other available spaces, either within the community or within the campus to meet some of those needs, and and again, that can become part of that phased. But I think we as both the department and the town haven't really had a chance to look at all of this. I mean, we were marching forward with the direction that we've been given by the select board and, what we used when we formed the task force, that we were going to have a structure to meet all of these needs. I think we've identified the needs. Now let's get creative on how we're going to continue to meet the needs without building our one structure, within the four
I
walls.
think it's important to focus on, instead of, we can look at the programmatic study and we can chip away $100,000 here, maybe $200,000 here, but that's not getting us anywhere, really. What we need to do is try and figure out a way to get what we need, but get the funding or revenue side completely changed. Focus on that, because saving, $50,000 on one little office room here or $100,000 there does nothing if you're talking about 23 million bucks. What we need to do is figure out how to get what we actually need and find other more creative ways to pay for it. That's my...
Did that answer your question, Bill? Is that?
I've got one other question. In terms of the development of these, the program, did we have outside consultants consulting on this?
So in terms of what we do, the department, it goes back, when was the last time that was looked at? I know the department.
Well, you did the programming
We did our
study.
programming study but I think what you're saying is someone evaluated what does Peterborough Fire Department do, and is it what Peterborough Fire Department should be doing? Is that what your question is?
And what it costs, isn't it?
Yeah, and what it costs. I guess the short answer is no. I mean, we haven't really looked at that. I know there's been little bits and pieces done in the past for conceptual stuff, but we've never looked at, we've never looked at it.
We've looked at dispatching.
As a whole, yeah.
We've looked at, components. The challenge is finding someone that actually does that work. That's a complicated task in and of itself.
Back in, when we started the day staffing, there was a comparison done at that
Yes.
point in time. Chief, was it Lennox or Black? Lennox. Chief Lennox, I know, worked with Cam and some others, and so actually somebody on the board, to really analyze what was going on in departments around us, and really what we as a community were very fortunate that they saw the writing on the wall, and the goal of the day staffing was to put people in there to get the ambulance out the door, to get the fire trucks out the door quicker. And our current operation and our current staffing model has grown out of the increase in demand over that, almost 2-decade period, from what was originally done, through that analysis back in 2003, 4, 5, somewhere in that range.
Well,
Shortly after Chief Lennox came on.
The size of what this conceptual thing that we've been looking at, the size of it and the square footage of it was developed based on HKT architects looking at what you do every single day.
Right.
And the programs that they, so,
But I-
they didn't just dream it up, that there has
But I
been
think,
study.
but Bill's question goes one step further back.
They're
Bill's
operating
question
off
is
the-
like,
off your
they're,
specs.
right, they're
Yeah.
operating off what we do. I think Bill's question is a more fundamental question of, is what we're doing what we should be doing? To sort of,
Right, and,
Yeah.
and maybe a third party disinterested.
yeah. So when they say we
So
should be
maybe
doing
part of the
more,
funds-
so when they say we should be doing more, can I come back?
If you want to do that, that is a different purpose
Yeah.
entirely, and we would have to raise and appropriate money separately for that.
You couldn't write that as part of your bond?
No. No, not at this stage.
Much too big a digression from this.
Exactly. You have to keep the language as similar as possible.
But you just stated the demand over the years has created the services that you provide because you're serving. So, and then you answered that in the questionnaire from the architect. So to have to pay for a third party and Rich's words to come up to tell you what you already know because you figured it out, it seems like it'd be redundant maybe. Anyone else in the budget committee have anything to add or questions before
I guess if I could quickly just build to your comment earlier, I mean, does anybody have a real feel for what we could raise outside through government grants, through the federal grants, through the state, through private? Does anybody have any feel for that? Are those millions, tens of millions?
No, I can't speak to private fundraising because that's not something that we've dipped our toe into yet. It's something we're planning to start working on once we got through this process. As for federal funds, as for state funds, there are none available and there's no expectation that any will be made available. We would be looking to FEMA and grants that they would provide. Right now, there is a bill that's been proposed, but there's nothing currently on the books to fund a project like this. So what we would be turning our attention to is lobbying for the kinds of funds that would go towards this. You know, whether it's a community impact grant, which is direct aid from Congress, or something that would be administered through FEMA.
This is an outside the box moment.
Right, but I just think
And
there'll be a lot of
that's-
other towns that would like
That's
to
gonna
pursue a
be-
similar track as well.
There are many communities who are in a similar boat as us. You know, the aid for firefighter grants for building construction went away 15 years
Yeah,
ago.
they basically only tie those to what was the first funding group that came out?
The ARA money.
The ARA money, they built that in with ARA.
And then,
There's Fire Act, which is a FEMA grant to fire departments.
yeah.
That was in the 2009, 10, 11.
Exactly,
That stuff, yeah.
So is this just
What you said.
wishful thinking that we
No.
can get money from the Fed or
I
any of
don't-
these agencies?
I don't think it's wishful thinking. Again, we're not the only communities in this boat. There are other organizations who are lobbying on behalf of municipalities. We could certainly join in with them. We can work again directly with Representative Custer or, Senator Shaheen's office and try to get community impact grant money, which is available again. Try to get those funds, pointed towards this project. There are things that we can do. It's just they're not guarantees. But the way that this language is written is to allow us to obtain those grants, aids, gifts, anything, any revenue from any other source to put towards this project and then to reduce, the taxpayer impact of it.
I think it's possible.
If we could do this, the funding part of it, would it still be in time to, would we be able to accomplish that by 2024, I think it was, for digging in the ground? Could
I
that
think so.
financing be
It's hard
arranged?
to do anything without a plan,
Right.
until you
Well,
have
even if we had the
that
plan,
shovel-ready plan.
even
yeah.
if we had the plan, could we accomplish the financing?
Let's look at what happened with the federal government last week. All of a sudden, they found $13 billion to come up to help out with the war effort in Ukraine. So let's not pretend like, that everything has to be completely by the book. There's no outside of the box thinking that can affect getting some money for it. I'm happy to get into it. I met with Annie Custer yesterday, and I'm ready to badger all of them to death until they agree to give us some money. And I'll walk to Washington with a sign with any one of their names on it that says that they helped.
Anyone else?
Seth?
If I could just add to that, don't think 24 is completely out of the realm of possibility, but in my experience with municipal construction projects and outside funding sources, 24 will be a very, very difficult target. I don't disagree with Bill. I think it's possible. Things are possible. I think it would be very challenging because at this point we would be, with an affirmative vote at town meeting, we would then be able to start the competitive bidding process for a firm to help us through this process. And that work usually takes in the order of 9 to 12 months time there. So you won't have documents in hand until 24. That doesn't make it impossible, but then you have to work within the funding schedules of the town at that point as well. Second, not to belabor the point, Bill's absolutely right. Phased approach, having full and complete construction documents in hand, regardless of whether you intend to carry out the entire plan, is incredibly critical for when those funding opportunities come up. You have to have them. So if you take this, if you design this in phased approaches, not only will it cost more money, you won't be ready for those opportunities when they do come up. And this is a community that has capitalized on those opportunities. For instance, the PUC money we got for the solar array. We were ready for that. We were shovel ready. When the money became available, we were ready to go and we were awarded the money.
It's not like this is our first huge challenge that we've come across in the last few years, so it's just another huge challenge that we'll figure out how to make it happen.
Anything new? Anything else to add? Okay, now we'll open it up to the public. I would just ask you to state your name for the record when I call on you. Alec Kreutz is taking minutes off campus here, and we are on air, so if you could speak up so it could be captured for integrity, whatever. Posterity, there you go.
So up here,
Sorry. Yes, sir.
Yes, I'm wondering, it's Joseph Cox. It's a multi-town service, the ambulance. How come Peterborough's paying for it by itself?
So we don't have a municipal district, a multi-municipal district that we can use to pay for. I'm sorry, I am answering your question, I promise. So because of that, it has to be the community that is the host of the service host. The ambulance service, we do bill out other communities for things that include the facility cost, the maintenance cost, and would include some of this financing as well. So the communities that participate in our ambulance service would be billed a portion of the total cost.
They used 43% of the service last year.
Yes.
That would be $10 million. Are they willing to pay that?
That would be, so that it's a proportion, it's going to be over multiple years, not a single year.
Yes, I mean, are they going to be willing to support that much of a bond?
That is what we're going to work into the rates.
But I mean, shouldn't you talk to them before you build a station to
Well,
find out? I mean, all you gotta do
we're
is talk to the
offering-
other towns and see if they're
Sure.
willing to pay that.
Well, the ambulance service isn't $23 million of it either. That's, the $23 million is for the entire project. And of that $23 million, 6 or 7 of it was for site work costs that have nothing really
How
to
much
do
is-
to the fire
How much is the
department.
cost of the ambulance service? Is that what you were talking about?
Out of
just building that?
the facility, I don't know exactly.
We don't know, we haven't broken that particular piece out. I think the other way to look at it for an analogy is right now, the ambulance service, essentially, the way that we support the fire station, because the town owns that building, there's no other capital cost. The ambulance pays an allocated portion of all costs associated with operating that building. They pay all utilities, all the repairs, everything else is an allocated cost. That allocated cost is built into what we charge our other communities. So as you go forward, if you look at an analogy, when you have a landlord who provides renovations for a building or builds a new building and then rents that out, that the cost of that rent is included in that. So as we develop that and we get into what that cost is in that allocated share, that will be built into the ambulance fee. And all the ambulance communities, all the communities, including the town of Peterborough, will be paying an allocated share of that portion of the building. And to Bill's point, the direct portion for the ambulance service, the town of Peterborough, 62% of the call volume for our ambulance service, emergency service, was in the town of Peterborough last year. So that gives you about 58% of it was in the other communities. When you look across that, though, that does not represent 58%, excuse me, 48%, 38% of the use of that building. The ambulance service is only a portion of the use of that building. Fire department, emergency management, other things go into that too. So until we really get down and nail that beyond the very preliminary point we are, where this is square footage, we don't know what those allocations are.
But the living spaces that we're talking about building, that's for the ambulance service.
No, that is for all of our staff.
But what
And-
do you, right now, what is it? The ambulance is gonna, stay there, the people that work for the ambulance.
Correct, and we also look at firefighters stay there during during storms and other times. Firefighters utilize the kitchen, they use the training space, they use the office space. That is shared widely across both fire and EMS.
Okay.
One more question. I think we should talk to the other towns before we raise their rates 3 times and see if they're willing to, they're still gonna be part of the service.
I don't know if we'd be raising their rates 3 times.
All right, well, we'll have
Ours is
that
gonna be
number.
one.
We should take from someplace else, but there is no other choice.
That's a good point. Bill, did you have something?
He actually asked my question.
Okay. Peter, you had your hand up.
Yeah, the 2 million, does that include the final design of the police department up there too? Just to be
No,
added
it's
on,
not.
just the fire, so it doesn't have any of that other building to be built on?
Right, it's just gonna be what we were talking about a couple
Because
weeks ago.
paper's pretty cheap for them to design it while they're doing the engineering and stuff.
Yeah.
And the other thing is too, I hate to see the town lose the opportunity of not doing it now. We don't do the bond this year, get it, you just kick the can down the road another year.
Again.
7% increase, you just added another $1.5 million to the project, kick it down a year. So, every year we kick it down the road, it's not gonna get better.
Carol, I'll get back to you, sir, when everybody else is asked. Oh,
You can go.
John? Yep.
Sure. I'm John Hampson. I've been here my whole life, and I've been in the fire service since 1978. I just wanted to say, last week I think I recognized our 60 members in gratitude for the past 2 years. This time I'd like to push it back the other direction. In all the years I've been in Peterborough, anytime there's been a rough spot regarding the budget, what project we're going to do, the fire department got kicked backwards, and there was no fortitude to go to this kind of discussion and thoughtful discussion that you're having right now. And I'm really grateful that everybody in this room is willing to and appears to be ready to figure out the solution to this. And I'm just so grateful for that, and I think you all should be recognized for that. Thank you.
Thank you. Carol?
Yes, Carol Nelson. I have 3 questions and 1 observation. 2 weeks ago, we sat in this room and we've talked about $23 million. How did we not know then that we were this close to maxing out the credit card? Why are we just finding out today?
So if I can address that. 2 weeks ago, we hadn't started the calculations. If you look at this calculation that goes in, there's a few variables that change on an annual basis, not the least of which is the town's total valuation and the debt service the town currently has on the books. So until you actually start going through that process, and this is just 1 page out of all those spreadsheets, there's a whole lot more that goes along with this, but until you actually start going through this process, you're not entirely sure where you are. And secondly, to be honest, we weren't expecting the project to come in quite as big as it did. And so when we got back around to it and started running the math, that's where we realized,
Okay,
we're as close as
thank
we
you.
are.
Keep
Yep.
please keep that slide
Sure.
up. So, on that same note then, you guys know that you need to do the DPW, the police station. Have you done projections into the future? When is that going to be available? If you've maxed out the credit card, how do you expect to do those additional projects?
Again, that's why we're looking to do a phased approach, and we're looking to figure out how can we do these things. We've always wanted to do a phased approach with the police department because we knew that they were okay with where they are now. The DPW project, we're looking at doing that this year to get that ball rolling this year. We were planning to do it 2 years ago, but so this is what we're trying to do is keep these projects moving forward. They're all necessary.
I understand that, but has anybody done a 5, 10, 15-year projection? We're talking like probably $40 million by the time you're finished with everything.
Yeah. And we have done that. The CIP's looked at projections for many years now. They've looked at estimates. You know, this, certainly they weren't looking estimates that were quite this large because a lot has happened in the last couple of years in terms of escalation costs.
I understand.
You know, increase in construction, and now we're looking at increases in just financing itself.
Right. So that was my question number 2. Question number 3, I think Mr. Lesser said that if the $2 million that they're requesting passes, does that shoehorn us into agreeing to a $23 million project?
No, it's the opposite.
No.
It puts it back on the table to being able to look at more options.
Okay.
Provide expendable documents.
All right, then I misunderstood him.
No, that was my question. I think we misunderstood the answer, though.
Okay, thank you. And there has been a lot of talk tonight about the fact that the public and the Budget Committee is against this high price. But if you look at the meeting minutes from the task force from February 10th, it specifically says that someone says, how is this a reasonable cost? And Nicole says, should we pump the brakes on this project? And this is a lot of money to spend. So even the task force was saying, hold on a minute, this is a lot of money. So I take a little bit of offense that it's just the public and the Budget Committee that was concerned. Obviously, the task force was as well.
Well, the task force, the majority members of the task force voted to continue moving the project forward in light of the cost.
They did, but
Yes.
there's no debate that there was concern amongst some of the task force members.
There was debate and discussion.
Yes, absolutely. There was extended discussion. Yeah.
And there were several people who voted against it in this room right now.
Your observation, Kara? Did you say you had an observation, or you?
The observation was the task force.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Loretta.
Loretta Laurinaitis. I actually have a couple of questions. I'm still a little bit confused about the whole ambulance program, because I thought when it was set up, it was supposed to be a self-supporting program. And I know this year, Peterborough has to pay over $300,000 for it. And I thought I understood that Peterborough also paid for the program last year. So I don't understand how it operates there.
So
we keep getting billed for more.
So the ambulance service builds a budget based upon the operation to deliver service to Peterborough, the communities we serve, and on the other side of it is the transfer side. Originally, when the ambulance service was sort of constructed into its present form, we were fortunate enough that the insurance billing was enough to cover the cost of operating the service. At that point in time, the town was receiving around 52 or 53 cents on the dollar for every dollar of bill we sent out. So if we billed $1,000, we get $520 back. We're now receiving about 30 cents on the dollar for that money we send out in insurance bills. So when the original idea of setting the service up as a self-sufficient service was proposed 10, 12 years ago when those discussions first started, the framework was much different. We are no longer receiving the level of reimbursement from insurance companies we are receiving. The town of Peterborough has always had a charge for their ambulance service. The town has been very fortunate that the surplus revenue that we received by doing the transfers on the ambulance has been able to cover the most of that. But as we've decreased from that 52 or so cents on the dollar down to 30-something cents on the dollar in revenue, we no longer have that margin with the surplus within the transfer service to cover the town of Peterborough's costs. So the residents of Peterborough have always had that bill. They've just been very fortunate that they've been able to fund that share of it through the surplus revenues on the transfer side, as opposed to having to fund it through direct taxpayer support.
Okay, I'm still a little confused about it because I don't understand. It sounds like Peterborough's share is still larger than any of the other communities, that it's not somehow an equitable.
It is inequitable. So if you, during the budget.
Gone over this in 3 meetings during this budget process?
Yeah, so there is a formula that we use to create here Nicole has it up on the board now, to create an allocated share of the ambulance service. So when you look at that, we are representing, as I said, that 62 is actually 63% of the call volume, 50% of the population. We are responsible, the Peterborough is responsible for 56.71% of the share of that ambulance service. That's a formula we've used, we're going on 8 years now.
And then if you look at it over time, Peterborough's share of service and Peterborough's cost of service are the second half of the columns there. 2016, our share of service was 55%, 2017, 54, 2018, 55, so on and so on. And you can see our cost of service has increased over time as the revenues have dropped off as a percentage of the overall. So this is exactly what we presented 2 weeks ago.
So
Does it also mean
Sorry.
that the other towns have been, their
Yes.
share has increased?
As you
as
can
well?
see at the bottom, all other towns' cost of service, and that has also increased over time.
Okay, I have one other question.
This is, we are going to talk about the ambulance service when we get to that warrant article, so if we could go back to the warrant article talking about the facility, that would probably be helpful
Okay,
for
but
everybody here.
I have a question regarding something you said.
Sure.
Because you were talking about the phased development.
Yes.
And you were saying the first thing would be the ambulance service, because that's what needs it, and the fire
most dire
department
need.
could be wrapped around that. But what I've been hearing is that what's really needed are the, addressing the safety concerns for the staff who are in the facility and for the fire department. So that seems to be contradictory.
Not at all.
No, the staffing that is there, we have 4 EMS providers there, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And the other staff that we refer to as the day staff. So we have an EMS deputy chief, myself, administrative assistant, fire prevention officer, and others. So those are the folks that are spending their time in there. So when we talk about our staff, staff involves all of our personnel. They provide both fire protection and ambulance service.
Okay, thanks.
Joe?
Yeah, I was just saying, if we got rid of the net zero, it would probably save $1 million off the project.
800,000. That was the estimate.
Anyone else?
So why are we doing it? $800,000, that's,
Oh, we're not moving that forward now. That's being taken off the table. We're not looking at construction at all, we're just looking at plans.
Bob?
Talking about the $2 million, but now you said we're gonna be doing this in stages, like, once you get the plans, you might do the ambulance first. That means the fire department will still be down in that piece of junk down there on Summer Street?
Yes.
So what concerns you have about half of the staff being down there and the ambulance staff being up here?
There are no firefighters who are assigned to sleep, live, or conduct business in that building on a
They
regular
would just
basis.
be coming when
The
they
ambulance
call?
staff is.
Okay. Just concerned.
That's one potential way to look at it. Again, we're literally spitballing this for the last, now going on 8 hours.
Any more questions from anybody or comments? Before I'll ask for either a motion to fund this through direct taxation, or a motion to bond it, or a motion not to take it up.
Does Nicole have to first check with the council?
I really don't have time, unfortunately, to check and then bring the board and committee back together. So I'd be asking for a preferred direction from the board and the budget committee, and then a vote to support that article. And then I'll go back to bond council if it's a bonded if you choose to support the bonded article, and ask her if this will work. Essentially, if how we've gone about this, how we've gone through this process will work for bonding. If she says, no, I can't approve this, I can't allow you to move this forward to bonding, then I'll pull it off the warrant, probably after the deliberative session. It'll have to come off and not go to town meeting.
We know what the impact would be if we came out with a $2 million in taxation. What would be the impact on our tax rate if we go to bond?
31 cents.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Per thousand.
Per thousand, I
Yep.
understand.
And that's using, again, of course, today's valuation.
Right.
So Nicole, should this motion be from anybody from select board or budget committee, and we'll all vote however we vote on which is chosen, A, B, or C.
Yeah, I think that makes the most sense to have the chair of each committee ask their boards to vote in favor of one of the articles, and you can choose which one you'd like to.
Do we choose first?
I just wanted to say that I think the $2 million direct taxation option would cost more to taxpayers in 1 year than the $26 million or $23 million bond would have. So it would be quite a shock to have 1 year with all of that added on and then not have it the next year. So,
particularly if we don't need to.
Yeah, so I would recommend to anybody who's about to vote that we don't support this one and we do support the bonded version.
There is the possibility for the select board to choose to use the money in the expendable trust fund towards this purpose to reduce that taxable amount, but it would still be about the same as a 1-year bond payment.
We also would have the option to use that expendable trust fund and not bond the full $2 million, correct? So we could technically only need to bond 1.3 or even less than that, and apply that $700,000 to that, which would be my recommendation.
All right, Loretta, one more question and then we'll carry on.
Yeah, I just need clarification for the direct raise through taxation. Is that a 2/3 vote or is it only for the bond? So the direct one would be just a majority vote?
Simple majority, yeah.
For the people to approve it, okay.
Well, it could be on the ballot, it would be up to the select board, yeah.
Okay, so Carl had a recommendation for the select board. Does that need a second, or do we just want to get a consensus?
Can you say the recommendation again?
For
the budget committee.
We're looking for the budget committee vote here?
Yes.
All right, well, I would like the budget committee to give me a vote on the bond, and we'll see if that passes. So all those in favor on the budget committee of the bonded option for $2 million, please indicate, raise your hand. See, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And opposed, I think the balance, or they abstain?
Abstain.
I see 1 opposed and 6 affirmative.
2 opposed.
All right, I'm sorry.
Okay, I'll oppose.
Your hands are small.
I was going to abstain. I also have 2 of them.
No, feel free to abstain how you feel like, you know.
I prefer to abstain. I don't
So
think
missing one.
Oh,
You've abstained, Donnie's abstained.
So I think
2 abstains.
I think it's 6, 1, and 2.
Wait, you say you're abstaining?
Abstain.
All right, 2 abstain, 1 nay, and the balance are yay.
For the select board, what say you on the bond version for $2 million? Yay?
Yay.
Okay.
Aye. Yay. Whichever.
Okay, next up.
Okay.
Thank you, everyone. Next, ambulance service revolving fund, right?
Yep, and just to reiterate, this is to see if the town will raise and appropriate the sum of $328,738 for support of the Peterborough share of the cost to operate the 911 emergency response ambulance service.
Budget committee, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? And select board, all those in favor?
Okay.
Was that majority on vote?
Yes.
And the community power plan, I'm just putting this up there for the select board's vote, since there's no money attached to this, but to see if the town will vote to adopt the Peterborough Community Power Plan pursuant to RSA 53-E:7, authorizing the select board to develop and implement the Peterborough Community Power Plan as described therein.
All those in favor?
Aye. We're voting to authorize ourselves. Let's go.
And then the last article is the petition warrant article that was received for the Economic Development Authority support of $31,000 for the purpose of a contractual service to support the Economic Development Authority in their efforts to promote business retention and new business development. This is a moneyed article, so we'll also be seeking the Budget Committee's vote.
We have some discussion, we haven't had discussion on it yet, have we?
Not really, no.
Is that appropriate to have some discussion?
So it is appropriate, absolutely.
And was Kara, would you like to speak on this? Because I know you had a pretty powerful letter that...
Yes, I didn't know if you guys received it before the meeting. So there was the petition article that went around. They got enough signatures. But if you recall, in 2017 at town meeting, the town was requesting a certain amount of money to go towards the EDA, and they raised it to $70,000 on the floor of town meeting. And it's been a while since then, and I don't really know that there's evidence that that money has been well spent and had a direct impact on the town of bringing more people, more workforce, more work businesses, what have you. And $31,000 to do that again is questionable in my mind. So I'm just saying, if it were me, I can't vote in favor of this, and I won't if it goes to town meeting.
Can I speak next, Carol? Anybody else on the budget committee want to ask or say anything? Or do you want to?
I do want to speak in favor of this, of course.
Oh, okay.
But if the budget committee has any questions at this point. Carol is absolutely right. How many, 3-4 years ago now? They came out with a request for, I think, about the same amount of money. I think maybe $35,000. I don't remember the details of it. But it was very, very clear that we needed to have a sustainable marketing presence to herald the town, particularly at a time when it was tough times. So at money, and then like Carol said, extra money was actually raised. It jumped to $70,000, and that monies were used to create a Peterborough Works website, multimedia advertising essentially for the town, prospect for the town, and it was under the authorization of the EDA and under the direct involvement by the Office of Community Development. That relationship will continue, but the $31,000 is primarily to sustain the not multimedia but social media presence of the town. So that, and the feedback that we've been getting as a board, I'm liaison to the EDA, and I was on the EDA when this was all going on. The feedback we get is soft, I must admit. But everybody reads the magazine. Those publishers have no clue as to exactly what, or the people who advertise in that magazine don't have hard numbers as to exactly what that impact is having. And this is even softer than that. At least maybe if you're selling a product, you'll see an increase in sales. But this is even softer than that. What we get in feedback are people, anecdotal primarily, from the real estate agents in town who say, you know, we saw your town. I know a number of people. We saw your town on social media and we came to visit, and it was wonderful. And it, you know, we don't have an operational Chamber of Commerce currently, so there's no promotion necessarily through that. That's rebuilding, but that's not existent yet, really. I mean,
That's not true.
It's around, it's around, but it's not as operational as it was in the past.
So when this started, that's when the Chamber of Commerce was in flames, right?
No, actually, it's preceded that.
Well, the writing was on the wall,
Yeah.
wasn't it? And they were completely useless at that point.
Pretty much.
So now the Peterborough Keene Chamber actually has an office across the street.
They're rebuilding, but, you know.
Okay.
Yeah, Bob.
Then years ago, I don't know if this is still in same category or what, when the chamber was in town, they came and asked for $6,000 to do a figure 8 or whatever it was called. Was it a figure 8?
Oh, yeah, that tour.
They want to dedicate, they want to stake to designate the scenic route or the whatever, not scenic, but whatever.
So is that something like this, basically trying to get people to come in?
No, not exactly. This is for social media promotion, so post to Instagram about Peterborough to attract.
I can see people seeing that and coming to town and then leaving, but I don't see any really development of workplaces for people to really work and make a living in town. So that's what kind of, to me, is a lot of money. And if there's 70,000 or so, it's already been spent.
But that was over 5 years.
Yeah, but still 70,000, that's a lot of money to some people, even over 5 years. And you don't really see what's going on in town. Is it really worth another 31?
So is this money in the budget and it's been eliminated, and that's why they're petitioning to
Yeah,
reinstate that?
they ran through it. It was a special article, and they ran through the funds.
Are there salaries, excuse me, are there any salaries involved here, or partial payments to people, or?
Well,
there, in terms of, somebody works on social media, so there's a price for that.
Right. There's a group in town called Drum,
Mhm.
do social media posts and so on and so forth, development projects.
It's contracted.
It's contracted, okay.
So most of that money that you see there is actually for that contract.
So we are employing them in some sense. You're creating some kind of work environment, and they in turn have other businesses that they deal with besides the town, obviously, or do they? I would say they're not dedicated.
Other clients.
Just they have other clients,
Right.
so they're not dedicated to the town. Do they have an opinion about whether their work has been helpful? Sorry, that's a long question, I know.
Contractor says their work isn't. There are some ways in which you can track social media, count eyeballs. There's a number of different things. We did a fairly sizable report. What was it, last year or the year before, in which we did an analysis of it using a lot of analytical tools, the best tools we could find, mostly Google Analytics. And the good track record based upon, tracking the number of people who are coming to the website, for instance. Because you attract them through Facebook, they come to the website, they investigate. Whether we can count them when they come to town, and we informally ask them through the welcome team, which is part of this whole process. People fill out questionnaires when we get together and, as the welcome team, and we ask people, well, how did you find Peterborough? Was this used? Was the social media used in any way to attract you to come to Peterborough? And the vast majority, at least anecdotally, is yes. It may not be the driving force, but it's certainly adding to that.
So the vast, I'm sorry, Carol, I don't mean, just quickie. The majority of this 31,000 then operationally goes to Drum, essentially?
Pretty much, and it's over, how many, is this another 5 years or 3 years?
I think it's 2 years.
2 years.
Along that same question, sorry.
No, I'm done, but I know we have to get to Carol.
Yeah, go ahead. Sorry, go ahead.
Just a couple of observations. We as a town, I believe, are members of the chamber, the new chamber, right? So we get to use their services to also do some promotion of the town of Peterborough. So we do pay, I think, like $1,000 a year for that.
Yes, $1,000 a year to the chamber.
Okay. And the thing that I would like to point out is the EDA has not updated their goals since 2018. So we're sitting on goals that were written in 2014. And you want to do, they're asking to do a marketing campaign for goals that are incredibly outdated. And I believe, and Nicole, you can speak to this, we have the talent and skill set on staff at the town that could take this over. And we've talked about that numerous times at the EDA meetings. Nicole, maybe you could speak to that.
I do think that we do have some people on staff that could do it. Maybe not quite with the pizzazz that Drum can devote to it, but yes.
Well, here's the thing with Drum though. This has to go out to bid. There's no guarantee that Drum is going to be who you select.
Yeah, that is correct. It will need to go out to bid.
Exactly. So if you don't select Drum, it's going to be a different marketing anyway. So just something to think about.
Yes, we do have on staff some talent. Our experience in the past is that has been unsustainable. Staff moves on, staff loses interest. just even maintaining the website, we couldn't get staff to continue to maintain the economic development website. I disagree that the goals aren't changing. I know that there is a committee working currently to update those goals. And in fact, there've been a fair amount of discussion about that as part of subcommittees and so on and so forth. So that's where I'm at least.
Loretta?
I'm not a social media person, so what I want to try to understand is what does this add to, like the town of Peterborough has a Facebook page, correct? And it's got a website. So what would this add to that?
We don't go out to a local population. This goes out to a national audience. So you can pick markets where you target your posts. So the EDA is not looking inward to the local community. For instance, Peterborough, New Hampshire Facebook page, that's a local thing. They reach out to a larger audience, Boston, New York, California, you name it, to attract people to come to the area. So
isn't there any way to incorporate that with what the town already does?
I'm not sure. There's ad buys involved, and so on and so forth. I'm not sure that the town probably have the expertise to do it, but I don't know that they have the cycles to maintain a.
Well, we certainly have not done that. A few years ago, the town did invest in the Chamber of Commerce's promoting the region, which is underway, which is a regional promotion. We have not specifically looked for staff that would do this, and so we haven't looked for an ad budget per se, but it's certainly something that if the select board wanted us to begin working on, we could do that.
Any more questions or comments? Sure.
I think this needs, if we decide, well, we do want to vote on it, but I think it should be amended to say for 2-year contract, which was.
It cannot be.
Okay, because their request was $31,000 for 2 years. So then,
yes,
correct.
that's what they put in their documentation, but this is the actual warrant article that they had the petitioner sign on to.
I see.
So this is what's before town
Okay, so we can't
meeting.
change the dollars or put a time frame on it.
So I think we're ready to ask for all those in favor from the budget committee on this?
This is by petition?
This is by petition, but there's money involved, so we're asking for recommendation or not. One more thing, Carol.
So even though it's a
Sway us.
petition, you can't lower it to half of that?
No.
You
No.
can't
No.
go till-
That's what the petition called for.
Oh, so on the floor you can?
Could they at deliberative session?
Yeah.
They could. Petitioners.
Yeah, I think we've done that.
Anything, including zero.
All right. Yeah.
Well, I'll just say I'm going to abstain and hope that they will amend this to show a 1-year contract.
I'm sorry that I'm promoting this so inadequately, but, and it's unfortunate that the EDA didn't have the opportunity to actually present it to you
Yeah,
guys.
it would have been more helpful.
But we will, of course, present it at a deliberative session. And I was not on that committee developing the plan, so I'm not fully aware of all the details.
Appreciate that.
All right, with that, budget committee, all those in favor of supporting this? See 2, and those opposed? 4, and 1 abstention?
I'm going to
2
abstain.
abstention.
Abstain, right. I'm with those 2.
3 abstentions.
Should total to 9.
What's the final vote?
That's what we're trying to figure out.
Affirmatives? Again,
2,
please,
4,
sir.
3.
2, 4, 3. 2 affirmative. And select board, all those in favor? Opposed? No abstentions. I mean, nay.
Yeah, that was confusing.
All right, is there another one?
Nope, that's it. So as it currently stands, all articles with the exception of the bond and the ambulance The ambulance service funding are going to be on the ballot. Is the selectmen in favor of that? So we'd be moving everything else to the ballot. Yes. Okay. And that just gives us the 2 articles at the open session. Okay.
Well, this particular article will go on the ballot?
Would you like this, well, you said deliberative session, so that's why I assumed you wanted it on the ballot.
You know, I would prefer to defer to, is it possible to defer to the EDA to make that decision, or at least the committee?
They'll have to make the decision before Monday next week.
Well,
That is the last day that the selectmen can post the warrant.
I can make that happen.
Okay, so the selectmen will meet on Monday to vote on whether or not the article goes on to the warrant?
Hold on.
Whether the warrant goes on the warrant? I need a vote on the final warrant from the select board before I can put it together.
Oh, I see.
Does that vote have to be in public session?
Yes, yeah.
Any other ideas?
Well, you can make a choice right now. The selectmen can decide right now where you'd like to see it. If you'd like to see it at the open session after the bond and the ambulance article, because that's how it would have to flow. Or if you would like to see it at the deliberative session and then on the ballot.
I would like to see the session myself. Because then it gives the people who are responsible for defending this.
Yeah, exactly.
An opportunity to present it.
They should have been here tonight. If this was coming up to defend it, they should have been here tonight, someone.
Yeah.
I mean, that's their fault. I mean, if they're not here tonight, it's their problem.
There is deliberative session for them to defend it, and then
Right.
more people can vote on it on the ballot. And that is, deliberative session is video for people to watch after?
Yes, we always record them and post them. Yeah. It's not streamed live. We don't have the capability to do that.
But all you can do is modify.
I'm surprised how much time we're spending on this versus the fire department. It's
Yes, and then
amazing.
put it on the ballot.
Then put it on the ballot.
Yeah.
and-
I feel like no one's gonna stick around for this after the fire facility discussion at open session.
Present it first?
We can't.
Oh, yeah, that's
Bond
your
has to
order?
go first. Yeah, it's required.
Well, let's make a decision.
What do you think, Bill? Bill Kennedy? What's best strategy for you?
I quite honestly think, as I said, I'm inadequately defending that in this meeting. And I really feel as though, people who really know what they're talking about are going to be able to defend this much better in open session and get the kind of votes that we're looking for.
Well, is there a rule about it? Do we have to decide whether it goes to?
Yes.
You can decide right now, say yes, we can
Yes.
put it on the open session, I think, is
I
that
mean-
correct?
It sounds like Bill Kennedy's made a motion to put it on the open session. Is there a second?
It's the 3 selectmen.
Is there 3 of us now?
I'm not gonna second it, sorry.
Yeah, me neither.
I think it should go on the ballot.
Yeah.
And then get a good sales pitch at deliberative session through marketing.
There you go.
So can it be
So-
discussed at open session if it's not on the ballot? People can still speak to it or no?
Not at open session. It'll have already been voted
We've
on.
already voted on it.
The day
Oh, that's it, I'm
before.
sorry, right.
Yeah.
So then I'll make a motion to put it to the ballot.
I'll second that.
And those opposed?
All right.
Real cage match.
This
on
is
that
the
one.
first time that we've disagreed.
That's right.
Just a question on the bond one. So
It's over
if
35
Nicole
bucks.
talks to bond counsel and it's determined that it's not allowed for that bond to go, then what happens?
I believe I can pull it off the warrant before the selectmen sign it, as long as I hear back from her before Friday.
But then we never voted on the other option.
That's correct. So
So-
it'll just go away for the year. That'll be
Are
it.
you confident that council is going to allow it on?
Not at all.
Do you want to have a vote?
Wait,
Not at all.
We can't have it.
she's pretty open
Have a
to
vote like
creativity.
If that-
No, then
Okay.
yes?
So I
Ask for those
think,
help.
yeah.
See,
I mean,
this is
then-
the same,
then
this
we'll
is
have to-
Rennell, right?
This is Rennell.
She's the one that helped us cut the library.
She did.
done very creatively and done, so.
But,
So you just have the challenge.
Jim, to Carl's point, I think to say to people, hey, give us more than we're gonna ask you to fund an entire project in one shot.
Oh, I
is,
agree,
you know, not a reasonable ask.
I just was curious how the process worked.
Yeah, it will put us back, it will put us back a year, for sure.
Well, I'd like to echo John Hampson's words and thank everyone for having these difficult discussions. We all know what we need and we all know what we can, try and get by with, so that's what we're here for. So thanks, everybody.
Motion to adjourn?
Yeah, I second.
I think it's a unanimous on adjourning.
How about a motion not to